My wife and I spent hours with our daughter down in the Canton Library basement reading books in the kids section. Loved the beanbag chair, by the way. There were storytelling hours, crafternoons. By the time Olivia was in 5th grade, there was a writing club. Overseeing all of this was Miss Valerie. And most everyone who has kids in Canton or is a kid knows Miss Val. Children's librarians are like essential bedrock figures in a community. Like Mr. Ben in Plattsburgh, and he's today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Claxton Hepburn Medical Center, dedicated to providing patient care and regional services to the people of St. Lawrence County. claxtonhepburn.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, May 2nd. First up, communities throughout the country are dealing with the lack of poll workers. During the 2022 midterm elections, there was a national shortage. NCPR intern Zach Jaworski reports it's an issue facing many North Country counties.
Local election officials say finding poll workers has been a problem for years.
It's always a challenge.
It's always been a struggle.
Altogether, collectively, it has been a struggle.
That was Tom Nichols and Jenny Bacon of the St. Lawrence County Board of Elections and Jade Sherman of the Hamilton County Board of Elections. They all agree that staffing problems appear to be an age-based issue. Here's Nichols.
It's not a real flashy job to do, so a lot of younger people do not get really excited by it.
Of the more than 300 election inspectors St. Lawrence County trained this year, nearly a third of them were over the age of 71. And Bacon says many of them aren't around for elections early in the calendar year.
A lot of our election inspectors are snowbirds, so they are still in the South.
Election officials also worry about them aging out. Sherman in Hamilton County says that many of the younger people that could fill those roles are busy.
When we need them to be poll workers, they're normally doing their regular jobs.
Sherman's colleague, Gail Teal, also works at the Hamilton County Board of Elections. She says she'd like to try and get young people more involved.
We want to go out to the schools and educate these teenagers. Unfortunately, we get shut down. We don't get return phone calls. It seems like they don't care. This is important for our county, and we hit a wall.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the national climate right now.
That's Rashawn Davis, the executive director of the Andrew Goodman Foundation. It's a nonpartisan organization that tries to get young people involved in the democratic process. He says Teal's experience isn't unique. Many school administrators are worried to talk about politics.
The truth is that democracy is so much more than showing up on election day. What I find is that young people are energized and engaged, but oftentimes they don't necessarily have the outlet to express that involvement.
He believes the solution is taking a more holistic approach to teaching students about civic engagement.
It has to be a joint effort between not just educational institutions, but entire communities that just decide, hey, our democracy is at its best when young people are involved, and this is how we do it.
The next election is the primary on June 25th. The results will determine candidates for November's ballot, including the 21st Congressional District and Plattsburgh's mayoral race. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Zach Jaworski in Canton.
In our small towns and cities, children's librarians tend to become big celebrities. As part of our ongoing series about North Country libraries, Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman introduces us to Plattsburgh's beloved librarian, Mr. Ben.
About a dozen kiddos and their families gather in the Plattsburgh Public Library Children's Room. They're here for family story time with Mr. Ben, a.k.a. Ben Carmen. Carmen and his assistant, Abby, get things started with a song.
Hello, everybody, can you wave your hand? Wave your hand.
Carmen's got a natural flow for story time. Books.
I've got a story for you.
Banter with Abby and the youngsters.
I think we need more color in our day, so let's do our color song. Are you ready?
And, of course, plenty of songs.
If you're wearing blue today, please say hooray!
He says his goal is to make the kids feel like they're getting his time and energy.
I want them to feel like I see them. Like that's really what it comes down to. But also, creating lifelong library users. I think it just starts at story time.
But Carmen says public library story times aren't always what get people into libraries, and that's not how it happened for him either. Carmen grew up in Brownville, outside Watertown. He says his library was the school library, and he had a special connection with one of the storytellers there.
My favorite aunt, my Aunt Donna, who's sadly no longer with us, but she was a library assistant in my elementary school.
Carmen says his whole class would call her Aunt Donna, and she was all in for the students.
You know, she would read us The Giving Tree or The Bear Who Slept Through Christmas, and she would cry, you know, and the whole class would just, you know, feel that like warmth and empathy.
Libraries became a family affair for Carmen. His mom became the caretaker of the Brownville Glen Park Library, and the two of them actually lived above it, rent-free. He says the librarian there gave him permission to go into the library whenever he wanted.
It was so cool because I was just always that curious kid that was like, where did this thing come from? What's the origin of this? And, you know, what's this book that looks interesting?
Carmen taught high school for a few years, but his career brought him back to libraries. He started working as the children's librarian at the Plattsburgh Public Library in 2016. Carmen says he remembers being a little hesitant about some parts of his new role.
I said at my interview, I'm thrilled to be the youth services librarian, but I don't know if I can do story time. I don't know if that's in my wheelhouse.
Carmen says he changed his tune when he got to see how fun and meaningful story time was. And he says he's always tried to channel the empathy modeled by his own special story time leader, his Aunt Donna.
Something I remember when I did my first story time here that I just was like, I'm doing this for you, you know? And I knew that she was totally there with me.
It was through story time that Carmen became known as Mr. Ben. He says it was unexpected, and he wasn't even all that comfortable with it at first. He says he thought it sounded cutesy and wanted to come up with a whole new name instead. In the end, Mr. Ben and related nicknames like Mrs. Ben or Mr. Bench stuck. Carmen says part of accepting that was overcoming a bit of imposter syndrome.
I didn't think I could be a Mr. Ben. Like, you know, I'm not Mr. Rogers. I'm not, you know, I could never be Fred Rogers. But, you know, we're our own thing, right?
Carmen says it makes all the difference when people in the library or out in the community come up and say hi to Mr. Ben. He says it's been a fun and fulfilling detour in his library career. It's a detour that's also gotten him some recognition. Back in 2022, Mr. Ben Carmen was awarded a key to the city of Plattsburgh and selected as the Grand Marshal for its holiday parade. But city dignitaries aren't the only people who think Carmen's been doing a great job. There's also younger people, like Maeve.
How old are you, Maeve?
I'm 3.
You're 3 years old? And do you like coming to see Mr. Ben at the library?
Yes.
What's your favorite part?
Reading the story.
Maeve and her cousin Ella come to story time with their grandmother, Robin Helwig, every week.
He's just so great with the kids.
Yeah.
He's just wonderful. And anybody you say to in the community, we go to story hour and we see Mr. Ben, they're like, oh, he's wonderful. Our kids did it years ago.
Carmen says he loves seeing multiple generations at story time. He wants everyone to feel welcome here.
You know, you've got a grandmother over here and a fourth grader and a little baby and, you know, somebody who's new to town. And it's just, I don't know, it's just heartwarming, like, to see all of those lives come together and just have a nice time, you know?
Carmen is now the director of the Plattsburgh Public Library, but he hasn't left Storytime behind. Mr. Ben still makes appearances, usually on Tuesdays.
See you next time, all my good friends. Until then, show me a silly smile.
He says his heart is still with the kids and families in the children's room. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio, Plattsburgh.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And come back.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Animal Crackers and the Curries, both of Potsdam. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.